a story that captivated the world. It still does. The disappearance of Malaysian Airways flight MH370 on March the 8th, 2014, would go on to become one of the greatest aviation mysteries of all time.
And we have breaking news right now. Malaysia Airlines confirms it has lost contact with a plane carrying 227 passengers and 12
6:30 in the morning
members.
local time in Beijing. At this stage, very sketchy details.
Just to remind you of what we're finding out. The flight number is MH370. It was
démarre ce journal avec le crash
A bordo de la nave con la que se perdió el contacto se encontraban.
This Boeing 77 seems to have vanished into thin air.
Well, the flight bound for Beijing disappeared somewhere over the Indian Ocean, apparently. But after a 3-year search, wreckage of the plane was never really found. 10 years on, the disappearance of MH370 has fueled wild conspiracy theories, including internet speculation that the flight might have been consumed by a black hole. So, what happened to MH370? I'm joined now by the aviation journalist and co-host of the Deep Dive MH370 podcast, Jeff Wise. Jeff, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So, look, what happened?
That is the burning question. I mean, I can't believe it's been 10 years and here we are still with no idea really what happened to this plane. It is the greatest aviation mystery, I would say. And the authorities just really don't have answers for us. They spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars looking for this plane. They had a theory for where it went, but when they searched the ocean, the seabed there, it wasn't there. And they frankly don't have a good explanation for why that is.
Yeah, a lot of people have speculated that it might have even been shot down.
Well, we know that a plane was shot down 4 months later, MH17, of course. And there has been, there have been all kinds of theories listen, we live in an age where anybody can say anything and some sort of rather crazy things get traction. Listen, it's a complicated technical case. When you really dig into it seriously, it takes a lot of attention and a lot of care. It has a lot of math. It has a lot of science and technology. But I think it deserves the attention that is required to really dig deep into it. That's why I have this podcast where every week we slice thinly through another aspect of the case to try to piece together what might have happened to it. And when you do that, when you take that time and attention, you find that a lot of these rather silly ideas fall away pretty quickly. And you're left with really two possibilities. Somebody took this plane. Somebody turned the electronics off and in some cases back on again and absconded with the plane. And what and how we explain that is quite a tale.
Well, go on. So, I mean, people thought maybe the pilot committed one of the greatest acts of mass murder that the world has ever seen, or wasn't there some issue with the flight simulator in his own home where they thought he'd chased the route? His family absolutely deny it. There didn't appear to be any indication that he was that kind of person, I suppose, although, quite hard to tell, I think. So go on. What's your most compelling theory then? Well,
there's two possibilities. Looking at the data that was sent by an automatic satellite communication system on board the plane, the Inmarsat data, tells us that the plane either went north or went south. Now, what has become more and more apparent is that this plane had a cybersecurity vulnerability. And this is something that at the time, nobody was really thinking about. Aviation has been historically very concerned with safety. That means making sure that things don't break, making sure that planes don't collide. There's been very little attention paid to security, meaning how do you make sure that malevolent attackers don't get into your system? And so when the 777 was built in the 90s, there was no passwords, no security. There's an unlocked hatch into the electronics bay.
So someone could have hacked this plane, you think? Someone could have hacked it?
So tomorrow in the latest edition of the podcast that we're releasing, I don't want to give too much away, but I think people should tune in to Deep Dive MH370 because we have an interview with a very well-respected cybersecurity professor who deals especially with aviation. And he says that, this system is wide open. If you get into that electronics bay, it's like getting on an internet with no passwords.
Really? That is fascinating. But, I suppose the thing would be, what would the motivation be then? Unless you were going to land that plane somewhere and sell it for parts or something, why would someone want to just hack it and crash it into the ocean?
Well, it's a complicated and rather technical story. What we have to look at before we can really deal with motives, we have to understand what happened. I like to say that if you find a bunch of bodies underneath my house, and there's all these dead bodies buried in shallow graves in my basement, you don't start by saying, why did he do it? You just sort of like arrest me and throw me in jail. It's the fact of what happened have to come before we start worrying about motives. And so what we really need to do is solve the case first, look at the possibilities. Now, the important thing to know about this case is that the authorities looked in the seabed. It wasn't there. They can't explain why. We have to expand our possible range of explanations and look at things, because some of the assumptions the authorities made when they started to look, when they defined the search area, must have been wrong.
Yeah, OK. All right, look, Jeff, thank you very, very much. Jeff Weiser, who is a journalist and a co-host of a podcast about MH370. And look, hey, if it was hacked, and if indeed our aircraft are hackable, I'm not for 1 second saying they are, by the way, if they are, though, then, of course, it would be interesting to cover that up, wouldn't it? Because otherwise people will get this massive fear of flying. It's $1 billion industry, etc., etc. Anyway, go and check out his podcast and see what he says.